Alright, so we covered writing a Hello World application using Express, we covered writing a Hello World application using Express and Swig, and we covered writing a simple Hello World application using MongoDB. So now let's combine that all together. So as a starting point, we'll use the app from our last lecture, which includes Express and Swig, and we'll just be adding calls to MongoDB to this application. So first thing we want to do is add our dependencies to MongoDB. So we'll get the Mongo client first and say Mongo client equals require MongoDB.Mongo client, and then we'll say server equals require MongoDB.Server. You'll see why I do this a little bit later, but the server is also from our MongoDB driver module. So now down here, we'll actually create our object describing our MongoDB connection. So we'll go var Mongo client equals new Mongo client, new server, localhost 270.1.7, and let's tell it to use the native bson parser. Alright, so one thing to note is that after this line, we actually have not established a connection to MongoDB. So this line is just sort of setting up our connection information. So this is creating an object that describes how we want to connect to MongoDB. So this call is synchronous. This call immediately returns, and we're not actually registering a callback. So next thing we'll do is just say var db equals mongo client.db, and let's use the course database. So it's the same thing here. We're actually doing mongoclient.db, and it's just giving us a reference to a database, but it's not a database that's connected yet. There's actually no connection to MongoDB at this point. So we're going to do something that seems a little bit strange, but hopefully later it will make more sense. So we're actually going to use db, even though it doesn't look like it's connected at this point, and go db.collection hello mongo express.find1 function error, and then the return document. And then the body of this callback will actually do this here. We'll actually render our page, but instead of passing in this document, we'll actually pass in the document that was returned from MongoDB. And note that this document actually must have a name field, just like the literal document we had before. So the documents in Hello Mongo Express must have a name field for it to show up properly in our Swig template. So this may seem a little strange. It looks like we're using our database reference before it's actually connected. But now if we go down here, you notice that none of these functions can actually get called until we actually start listening. So what we do is we actually open our database connection down here. So we actually say Mongo client.open and pass in the callback to call when we have actually connected to the database. And actually inside the callback, we'll start listening. So what this means is that we actually start listening as soon as the connection to the database is open. But since we're not listening before that point, these actually don't get called until we've actually opened our connection. So notice that each of these callbacks also takes an error. Right now I'm just not handling it, but in a real application you'd want to check the error and stop at that point. So right here we could actually say if error throw error. This is very simple error handling. It just throws an exception if we fail to connect the database rather than starting to listen on our app server. Alright, so let's try this out. Let's try node app.js. So now we see we have our Express server listening on port 8080. We can go back to our browser, and we still have Hello Swig sitting there. But if we go back, now let's connect again to localhost 8080, and we see Hello MongoDB. So I actually inserted a document before with the name MongoDB. So you can go back to our shell and stop this. We go Mongo and use course, which is the database we're connecting to, db.hello mongo express.find. And we see that there's one document with the name MongoDB, and what happens is that in our application we got the document from the database and we render it using the same template we used before, and what we're seeing here, our browser is hello.html populated with the contents of the document we had stored in MongoDB. So overall, the reason we see MongoDB here is because our templating engine is looking for a name field in the document we passed in and printing whatever value it finds. And the document we got from the database and passed to our template engine happened to have a name field with a string value of MongoDB. So that's why we see MongoDB on the page here. Alright, so that's an example of putting all of these together with MongoDB, Express, and Swig. Those are actually all the libraries that you need to know about to understand how the blog application for this course actually works. The blog application uses Swig as a template engine, Express as the router, and MongoDB as the backend data store.